Welcome to another episode of Volunteer Leadership in Lake Forest, produced by the Lake Forest Caucus. My name is Aneeqa Aqeel, and I serve as External Communications Chair. Joining me today is Jim Clifton, Chair of the Library Board. Jim is a 7-year resident of Lake Forest and has been a member of the Library Board since 2021. Thank you for joining us today, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here to learn about your volunteer work and about how the caucus process has helped you in serving Lake Forest.
Pleasure to be here.
So would you take a minute or two to tell us about your background?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, we moved to Lake Forest 7 years ago. 2 young kids, absolutely in love with Lake Forest, want to be here for the rest of our lives. I work in a non-bank lending organization that works with companies. I run their sales organization. And, I found myself a few years ago, I connected with the current president at the time of the caucus, just wanting to find a way to utilize my talents somewhere in the community. I've always believed in servant leadership. And so I felt like I needed to find something other than, just working all the time and contributing to this community that we've come to know and love. So for me, it was, finding an organization or an entity in town that, we really connected with. And the library was an obvious choice because we had young kids. We live close by. We were spending a healthy amount of time in the library. And it's an organization that, can really serve you your entire life, whether you're, a young parent or you're a senior citizen. It's always going to have an impact on you. It's an organization that can always play a role in your life. And so I was drawn to that, and I wanted to find a way to serve not only the Lake Forest community, but also work with the library because it's an organization that we've really come to know and love.
So what would you say are the key attributes of an effective library board member?
I think for the library in particular, it's an organization that it's more complex than you might think. And so someone who is really willing to dive in, roll up their sleeves, and understand the nuances of how a library runs and the various challenges that a library faces normally in normal times. And then also since kind of we've come out of COVID and during COVID, trying to be an effective organization in the community and serve the entire population of Lake Forest in very challenging times that I know we all went through, but then also adapting to sort of the new way of life coming out of COVID. So I think it's somebody who thinks bigger than just it's all about books and checking out books. It's someone who thinks strategically. It's someone who understands, the bigger picture challenges that libraries have faced across the country. Even if Lake Forest Library hasn't faced them specifically, but understanding some of the more macro factors that drive how a library runs itself and how librarians and how the staff think about serving the entire community. In spite of some of the challenges that libraries have faced, around the country, quite honestly. So I think it's someone who has to, who is really willing to dig in and understand all those things and not just think surface level about the library, the concept of a library being just a place you can go and check out books.
I see. So could you describe a challenging problem that you've worked on, collaborated with the library staff and your fellow board members?
Sure. This may sound somewhat obvious given that everybody sees it, but the dome replacement project. When I moved to Lake Forest, when my family moved to Lake Forest, I think we had seen from day one the tarp that was covering the dome. Mm-hmm. And that's all we came to know of the library was that you had a wrap on the top of the building. So finally getting to a point where I could serve on the board and then work with the rest of the board, work with the staff, work with the city, various contractors that were involved, architects, the actual contractor themselves, a lot of key stakeholders working with preservation folks in the community, trying to collect and engage with the community, collect that feedback that we needed to help guide us. Incredibly fascinating process. I think it was done very well in terms of engaging all the key stakeholders, soliciting feedback from the community. And I think we got a finished product that everybody is very proud of and that we can look at and say, now I finally have seen the dome, the library with the dome uncovered, right, for the first time in 7 years of living here. So it's a much longer story than that, but it was with all the stakeholders, with the history of the building itself, but also the history of how it got to that point. It was a fascinating process to work through. And I think we had a fantastic outcome.
Absolutely. So with that major project behind you, how does the board work with the administration, the library administration, to identify key challenges, to set goals for the library, and to figure out the needs of the community and how best to serve them?
We are at that inflection point right now. So the dome was sort of step one in my mind. And then I think where we are with the city survey being completed, we've now gotten that feedback. At our next board meeting, we're going to have the firm that actually conducted the survey help deliver library-specific feedback. I know they had presented to City Council at the last City Council meeting on October 16. We're going to take that library-specific feedback and help use it to guide us in terms of not only establishing a strategic plan, which we need to do for the next, call it 3 to 5 years, because it's coming due at the end of this year, but then also use that as a process to engage with the community, whether it's focus groups or just diving deeper into the survey results, to really understand what the key takeaways were from the community on how they want their library to function going forward. What are the key priorities, both from an infrastructure standpoint as well as from a programming and services standpoint?
So Jim, what aspects of public service in Lake Forest have you found the most rewarding and the most challenging?
I would say the most challenging to me is just never feeling like I know. I mean, even though we're a relatively small community, with 7,000 plus households, 20,000 residents, I never feel like I can know enough. There aren't enough hours in the days to get enough feedback, and engage enough with the community. That's always what's frustrating to me, is that, again, even though we are a relatively small city, it always I'm always thinking about what are we missing or who are we missing in terms of who we're engaging with, who we're serving. Geographically, Lake Forest, again, very vast. There's plenty of libraries, surrounding communities that have libraries all around. So I always think about, what are we not doing for those individuals who maybe are geographically located further away than our family, for example? We're just a stone's throw from the library, but not everybody is. So I'm always challenged by that. And I always want our board members and the staff members, and I know they're always thinking about that, but it feels like the population of Lake Forest is so much bigger than it really is when you think about trying to serve every single individual. Because again, the library is a building that can affect everybody, right? It should serve everybody, because it's whether you're 1-year-old or 99-year-old, you can take advantage of the library. So it's always trying to make sure we're serving everybody. That to me is the biggest challenge that I think about day to day. What's been most rewarding is when we make progress on things like the dome replacement project, and how much that's appreciated in the community, because that's exactly why I got into public service within Lake Forest. I wanted to have a more direct impact on my neighbors, on the friends that are around us, who they know the library, they know I'm involved with the library, and I get excited about talking about it with them. To me, that's been most rewarding, right? To have that direct impact that I was seeking when I first wanted to get involved with, really with any entity within Lake Forest.
Yes, and I've noticed that you guys have just launched the library app.
Yes.
Have you had good feedback on that?
I think so far. I'm going to actually, because it just launched, at the next November meeting, I'm going to want to see what kind of feedback we're getting in terms of, actual downloads, installs, usage, our patrons commenting on it to our, to the tech folks, to the IT folks, or to the staff in general. Yeah. Is it adding value to their experience with the library? Because that was the whole idea, right? It's an organization. It's a facility within the community that you can either think about it literally and experience it literally, where you're going into the building and using the building, or it could be that you're using it more remotely and technologically. So I'm curious to see and kind of hear from the staff when we have that next board meeting, to really dive into something like that, because it is pretty new and transformative for us. And technology is an area that we've tried to focus on improving over the years. So
in conclusion, as a caucus nominated volunteer, what advice would you share with other Lake Forest residents who are interested in serving?
I think similar to what I did, Josh Jackson, who was the president of the caucus at the time, was a good friend of mine. I got engaged. I started asking him questions. We had the meeting, I'm blanking on the name, the annual meeting where you get to come and meet with current caucus members, ask whatever questions you have about various commissions, how they got involved. To me, it's just reaching out and being proactive. Certainly talking with current commission or board members as well. That helps, I think, to get the real kind of day-to-day experience of what it means to be engaged in community service throughout Lake Forest. But I think just going, I mean, the caucus website is great. The various boards and commissions websites are great. So finding those people, reaching out to them, learning about their experiences. I'll be honest, I had been rejected for the library board at one point for good reason. I didn't have the right skill set for the organization at the time. So I think, and Josh was great in explaining to me, like, listen, that's the process, that will happen. That's okay, right? Keep at it. Be persistent. If you want to be on this particular board or commission, continue to show that interest. There will be a right time because we do need good people serving their community locally. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe in that. I think I got on the board at the right time when my skill set made the most sense. And that's what the process is all about, right? So it's, to me, not getting frustrated, not getting, sort of down about, if you don't get what you want, excuse me, if you don't get what you want at the right time, maybe there's a reason for that, right? So sticking with it and just always staying focused on why you're even interested in the first place, which is to serve your community. Not having a particular agenda or bias, just focusing on trying to make Lake Forest the best possible community to live in. And that was ultimately my goal for wanting to get more involved and ultimately joining the library board.
Well, thank you so much for your service and for taking time to talk with us today. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thanks, Aneeqa.
Thanks.